Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Bernie Sanders is out with another iceberg right ahead warning to the Democratic Party, writing an op-ed in the Guardian newspaper. But I got to tell you, reading it, I think Bernie is missing the trees for the forest, if you know what I mean. I think Bernie, although I agree with him on most policy, is still incredibly naive about the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, and the actual strategy that might be effective in showing the working class you give a damn. We're going to read through Bernie's op-ed, and I'll point out where I have disagreements here. So again, it's in the Guardian newspaper. Headline: Democrats risk a crushing defeat this year. They must change course now. Okay, so it begins at a moment in history when the leadership of the Republican Party is undermining democracy, ignoring the climate crisis, trying to overturn Roe v. Wade, opposing a minimum wage increase, embracing more tax breaks for the rich and the growth of oligarchy, and stopping us from passing serious gun safety legislation. It would be a disaster for the right-wing extremist party to gain control of the U.S. House and U.S. Senate. Unfortunately, it appears the current strategy of the Democratic Party is allowing that to happen. I would just remind Bernie, because he mentioned minimum wage here, it's not just the Republicans that are blocking minimum wage. I mean, 8 Democrats defected on a $15 minimum wage hike in a vote in March. The Senate on Friday is set to squash a bid to tack a $15 minimum wage to President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus aid bill, with 8 Democratic caucus members joining all 50 Republicans in rejecting the change. So the whole vote more Democrats in, yeah, well, that's not necessarily going to get us the $15 minimum wage, which, by the way, should be $25 to $30, or other policies, because it ain't just Manchin and Sinema that are neoliberal, corrupt, and against basic, frankly, moderate positions like a $15 minimum wage. I'm sure Bernie knows that, but he's very focused in this op-ed on Republican extremism and Republican obstruction. It's not just the Republicans. But let's continue in Bernie's op-ed. According to numerous polls, the Republicans stand an excellent chance of winning this November. The main reason, while the Democratic Party has over the years been hemorrhaging support from the white working class, it is now losing support from Latino, Black, and Asian workers as well. This is an important point. Trump actually did better with African Americans and Latinos in the 2020 election that he lost. But I believe he went up 4 points among Black voters and around the same among Latino voters. That should be a huge red flag. And the shift has continued since the 2020 election. Further, in terms of the 2022 elections, the enthusiasm level within the Democratic Party is extremely low. It is not only working class support that is fading away, but it is also that young people who helped elect Biden and other Democrats in 2020 are becoming increasingly demoralized and are not likely to vote in large numbers in this coming election. Why is this happening? Can this trajectory be changed? During his campaign, Biden promised to be the most progressive president since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And during the first few months in office, with the strong support of Democrats in Congress, he kept that promise. At a time when COVID was wreaking havoc on the health and financial well-being of the American people, under President Biden's leadership, we passed the American Rescue Plan, the most consequential piece of legislation in modern history. The $1.9 trillion bill was effective in providing financial support to tens of millions of American families and businesses, stabilizing the economy and improving our response to COVID. I'm not saying Bernie Sanders doesn't know his history, but to compare Biden and the coronavirus relief bill to anything Franklin Delano Roosevelt did is extremely disconnected from reality. Franklin Delano Roosevelt used an unprecedented economic crisis, the Great Depression, to actually pass structural, permanent change. The Social Security, New Deal, other New Deal programs, structural programs to strengthen labor unions, structural programs for disabled Americans. I mean, we could go on with the government jobs programs. FDR did not pass, a bill that, yes, helped in the short term, but was mostly stuff that expired in a year, in talking about the child tax credit and other provisions. That is not exactly, FDR-esque what Biden did. the coronavirus relief bill, had good things in it, definitely helped people in the short term, but you can't really compare it to the New Deal or FDR when, we cut child poverty in half for a year and then it went back up because we set these things for a year. It's not FDR. And I think Bernie knows better than to compare it to FDR. After the passage of this popular legislation in March 2021, President Biden had a 59% favorability rating, the highest of his presidency, and there was widespread support for what Democrats were doing. There was also a strong understanding that we had to go even further. The American Rescue Plan was an emergency bill that addressed the COVID-related problems facing the country. Now, with a new administration in office, the American people wanted us to address the long-neglected structural crises facing the working families of our countries. Among grotesque and widening income and wealth inequality and decades of wage stagnation, the existential threat of the climate crisis, a rigged tax system, and crises in healthcare, childcare, and housing. Now, I want to move down. Unfortunately, despite strong support from the American people, despite the support of the president, despite passage in the House of Representatives, despite the support of 48 members of the Senate, two corporate Democrats, Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, both of whom received millions of dollars in campaign contributions from billionaires and corporate interests, decided to sabotage that legislation. We needed 50 votes to pass Build Back Better. We had 48. And it has been downhill ever since for Democrats. After 9 months of fruitless negotiations with Manchin and Sinema, the time is long overdue to realize that this is a path that leads to nowhere except defeat at the ballot backs, and the growing perception that the Democrats have turned their backs on working families. We need a new strategy. We need to take on Republicans. We need to fight back. Well, although I agree that Democrats should take on Republicans, the problem is the Democrats are basically Republican light. And where I disagree with Bernie is you could have seen after a month or 2 months of fruitless negotiations with Manchin and Sinema that they weren't going to budge and they were just toying with you. So what would have been the actual strategy that one could have taken to show the workers, white, Black, Latino, that are fleeing to the Republican Party that you actually are fighting for them? No, not doing behind the scenes negotiations and Biden lying in fetal position as President Manchin ruled the roast here. No, going on offense against these two corrupt corporate Democrats. I said it months ago. Where was Bernie? Where was the squad? Holding rallies in West Virginia, holding rallies in Arizona, calling out their donors, calling out that Joe Manchin has literally made nearly $5 million as a senator from his coal company while serving as the chairman of the Senate Energy Committee. More importantly, where was Biden? Why wasn't Biden using the bully pulpit of the presidency to go after these two senators and say to voters, the Democratic Party is united. We have two essentially Republicans in our midst that are blocking healthcare for you, that are blocking climate policy for you, that are blocking paid sick leave for you. Why wasn't Biden doing that? Because we live in the United Corporations of America and his donors wouldn't allow it. Bernie knows this, and Bernie has not pressured Biden to go on offense against Manchin and Sinema. Bernie has not called out Biden for essentially saying, I'm the one who can get things done. Remember, that's all we heard during the 2020 campaign. Biden's the pragmatist. Biden's the one that could get things done with Republicans, even corporate Democrats in his own party. Well, where is Bernie saying, hey, you ran on this, it's time to deliver. We need to stop negotiating with these people and start exposing their obstruction to the American people. Now, you might say, well, Jordan, that's great, but that wouldn't have worked. Manchin and Sinema have no shame. Well, do you know? Have they actually had real pressure on them, aside from protesters following Sinema into a bathroom, protesters, paddling to Manchin's yacht or boat yacht? Whatever that was, Manchin on the water. They haven't had pressure. They haven't had the bully pulpit of the president. They haven't had the president calling them out. They haven't had the president holding rallies, pointing them out, calling out their corruption. That's actual pressure. And if you know enough about Joe Manchin, he's got incredible thin skin. AOC's former staffers, former chief of staff and former communications director, they started a super PAC. One of the first things they did was get on the air on radio in West Virginia earlier in 2021, calling out Manchin for not supporting the $2,000 relief checks for COVID. And what happened? Those radio ads, Manchin started moonwalking away from that position and signaling he might support it. So this is called presidential leadership. Biden's not doing it. And frankly, Bernie and the squad did not do it. There was a period that you could have pressured them. You could have gone on an all-out political crusade, in-person, rallies, digital, rallying your base of progressive activists. And in addition, saying to Biden, you don't have to say, Biden's corrupt, which I would like you to say. You have to say Biden needs to do more. Biden needs to actually go on offense, not just against the Republicans, but Republicans in the Democratic Party. But Bernie doesn't want to do that, whatever the reason. My friend Joe, he seems to think, oh, no, what we really need to do is call out the Republicans, not actually go on offense to shame these two senators. Because you know what? Maybe that campaign, maybe you could have flipped Sinema and then it's down to just Manchin. Or maybe you could have flipped Manchin and then it's down to just Sinema. And you turn your political organizing and your pressure campaign on just one of them rather than two of them. LBJ, who I don't love on a lot of things, LBJ was known as someone who he would take you out by the knees if you were obstructing him. He knew how to exert pressure on senators, and he would not let a Manchin or Sinema obstruct his whole agenda. Moving on. Is the situation hopeless, Bernie asks? I don't think so. But in order to turn the situation around, Democrats need a significant course correction. And in doing that, they could learn a lesson from the 1948 campaign of Harry Truman. In 1948, nobody believed Truman had a chance to win that election. Strom Thurmond and the segregationists had bolted the party, and Henry Wallace, a third-party candidate, was taking progressive votes away from Truman. Truman responded with a simple and straightforward strategy. Unlike today's Democrats, he took the fight to the Republicans. He didn't let them hide behind their whining and do nothingism. He exposed them for what they were, tools of the special interests. He made them vote on critical issues. And time again, they voted against the interests of working families. Truman showed the very clear difference between the parties, and he won. What the Democrats need to do right now is to make it clear. They may have 50 votes in the Senate, but they do not have 50 votes to pass the legislation that the American people want and need. They have no Republican support, and there are two Democrats who will vote with Republicans on important issues. Now is the time to make democracy work. Let us bring to the Senate floor the crucial issues affecting working families and vote, and vote again. Even if we lose these votes, which is likely, the American people have the right to see where their elected officials stand. Make them vote. In a given year, there are billionaires and large profitable corporations that do not pay a nickel in federal taxes. Let's see how many Republicans will vote for real tax reform to end these loopholes. Millions of workers continue to earn starvation wages. Let's see how many Republicans will vote to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. So here's the thing. Although I agreed with something like force the vote, let's force the vote to at least get Democrats on the record that they are against Medicare for all. In this case, I don't actually think forcing votes to show the Democrats say yes to good things and Republicans will vote no is really going to change that many minds, Bernie. Why? Because the voters who are fleeing the Democratic Party, they have a knowledge that the Democratic Party, when in power, and even when they had more of a majority. Remember, Obama had a near supermajority. Didn't pass the things that they're condemning the Republicans for being against. So you could say and show votes of the Republicans voting no and Democrats voting yes, but voters don't actually have a secure feeling, a trust that if you just gave Democrats, let's say 5 or 6 more senators, so Manchin and Sinema didn't have as much power, they don't have that trust that the Democratic Party, even with control of the Senate at larger numbers, even with control of the House with larger numbers, would actually deliver structural change on healthcare, climate, housing. I mean, I could go down the list because they haven't in the past. Obama had a near supermajority and he delivered a Republican healthcare plan hatched out of the Heritage Foundation. The problem is when Democrats have the opportunity to pass actual structural reform, Build Back Better, which did not go far enough, but would certainly be better than the bipartisan deals we're getting now in Washington. Biden lied in fetal position, allowed President Manchin and Sinema to hijack the whole thing, would not go on offense against them. And I've already established Bernie and the squad would not either. So I got to tell you, as I always say, I think Bernie is a revolutionary figure in spirit, but doesn't know how to actually create revolution in reality. It is not going to significantly change this tidal wave coming in November, where Republicans are likely going to take back the House by a lot, and Democrats might even lose the Senate. The second thing is, as I went over yesterday, Biden has tools. Biden has tools to bring down inflation and to show workers that he's fighting for them. I played a clip yesterday, 1962, when U.S. Steel and other steel companies basically price fixed steel, and steel went up $6 a ton. Guess what JFK did? He did a press conference and went at the steel executives, and then he had his defense secretary shift around submarine contracts away from U.S. Steel and these other steel companies that were rising steel prices, and gave the contracts to their competitors. And what happened? U.S. Steel and other steel companies backed down and lowered prices. I don't know. Does Biden have anything that the big oil companies like? I don't know. The billions of dollars in subsidies they get from the U.S. government every year, the tax breaks, other goodies that the United Corporations of America give to the fossil fuckers? Biden could go on offense way beyond a gingerly written letter to the oil executives that he just wrote yesterday, please asking them to lower gas prices, take away their cookie jar. So I got to tell you, I respect what Bernie has done for the progressive movement. I respect the millions of people he brought into the progressive movement. I respect his fight over the last 50 years. I think it's insane and absurd when people like Jimmy Dore call him a coward and a fraud and a sellout. Yeah, that's absurd. But I will say he's wrong on this. He's wrong on the strategy, and holding votes to just show Republicans voting no is not going to change a thing in the Democrats' favor, because the Democrats, when they had the opportunity to show they were fighting, when they had the opportunity to bend Manchin and Sinema to their will, did not do it. Why? Because we live in the United Corporations of America. Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.